As always, I never get sick and tired of seeing those images of Titanic. Good evening, y'all. It is your favorite maritime historian here again with the second part of the reaction to the Titanic 2012 miniseries. And I'm just going to go ahead and just get right into it. Honestly, I handled the introduction for part one. You can go watch part one. I'll link that in the description down below. So yeah, let's go ahead and get back into Titanic. Never gets old. Never get tired of that.
What's the matter, darling? Isn't this what you were expecting? Leave us alone.
My Victorian literature teacher would love this. She's a big fan of women's suffragette movement during this time period.
You've got your orders. Let her go.
So this is 1912. Women will not get the vote in the United States until 1920. Britain is not that far behind. At this time, this is pretty much the zenith of the women's suffragette movement. At this point, it's been going on since the end of the American Civil War. It pretty much really started taking off in the 1870s and really gained traction through the 1890s and to the turn of the century. And by now, it's very well known. A lot of the young women are involved in this. It really becomes almost kind of like fad in a way. The young woman, there's this generational gap, but the younger females really want to be involved in this, as exemplified by the youthful Georgiana Grex, who you can see here. So it wasn't all that pretty. I mean, they're in a jail cell, so obviously it wasn't. But what I'm actually getting at is that some of these women's protests would actually be very violent. And I don't mean like police brutality, which wasn't really a thing back then, as the way we think of it now. But actually, what would happen is women would actually go out and beat men. And sometimes, actually, groups of women would get together and plan basically terrorist attacks. And this is, in the 19th and 20th centuries. I mean, this is before that word was ever even invented, 100 years before that word was ever even invented. So this is a very serious crime that some of these women are involved in. So if you're a police officer and you see a group of women who are protesting for their right to vote in this case, although there were plenty of other issues that were going on as well, spousal abuse being one of them, and also the fact that it wasn't really until the late 1800s, almost the turn of the century, that women even had the opportunity to go to college. So there were a lot of issues at hand, and each group would protest over their chosen issue. And sometimes they do so violently. So if you are a police officer in this time period and you see a group of women who are protesting, you don't know if they're going to turn violent. You don't know if they're going to start beating you. You don't know if they've got a bomb or something. I mean, you don't know. So there is this precedent at this point that if there's a group of women around, the safest thing for you to do is to arrest them. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it happened.
You know, I can't help wondering why ladies.
So even though this guy seems like he's a jerk, I can't really blame him for his position there.
It's not her place to pick a fight with the police at Guildhall.
It was a demonstration for our right to vote.
See what I mean? So, picking a fight. So it kind of sounds like that there was some violence that was going on. I don't know if Georgiana was actually involved in it or not, but it definitely sounds like that there was physical altercations that did happen here in this demonstration. Georgiana says it was a demonstration for the right to vote. The police officer saying, you started picking a fight with a bunch of policemen. And they're likely both right. There were plenty of demonstrations that did turn out violent. And sometimes they started violent, like they were there to be violent. There were plenty of violent demonstrations during this time period. So they are both right. So, again, even though this guy seems like he's being an asshole, I can't really blame him.
Land up in a cell with a bunch of thieves and tarts.
One more word, and I'll report you to the Home Secretary.
Sometimes it pays to be rich.
I suppose. All right. Let her go.
And there goes any chance of you being one of the girls ever again, Georgiana. Not your fault, but the other ladies aren't going to be happy with you on that one.
Why on earth haven't we used them?
Because
Okay, I am not getting into this again. I've gone into this in the last video. You can go ahead and watch it if you want. I am so freaking done with the lifeboat tropes in these Titanic shows. I understand why they did them, but I mean, at this point, there's no point at all in it. This is the 4th of April. Titanic has already left Belfast. She's in Southampton now, um, ready to getting ready to depart on her maiden voyage in 6 days. I mean, what's the point? Like, they're not debating about this at this point. This is totally fictional, and it's a cliche that really just pisses me off. I'm sorry. I'm not going to get into this again. I've gone into this way too many times in some of my other videos. I'm just not. I'm not going here.
Of course. Well, we shouldn't linger. We don't have first-class tickets, and the guard will think we're stowaways.
I tell you what, why not come for tea with us on Sunday afternoon?
I don't think that's allowed, my dear.
Nonsense, I'll see that it is.
Okay, I have to pause at this point. So, second class, you're not like uber wealthy, like you're not Bill Gates wealthy, but you're at least, a millionaire. It's like this. I mean, you are wealthy. I mean, you are a wealthy person if you can afford a second class ticket on Titanic. Second class on Titanic and the Olympic class in general is the equivalent to first class on most other ships. So it's luxurious in its own right. I don't think they do a good enough job of depicting that in this, but I'll leave that for a little bit. So the idea of second class is it doesn't mean you're a second class citizen or anything like that. It just means that you're not at the same level as the first class, as that's more or less what Batley was getting at, because he's in the first class dining car and he himself is not first class, so he's a bit worried about getting into trouble, which is fair enough. But you are still a respected member of society if you are second class. And once again, I mean, I love that. Look at the reflection on the windows there for that. That is extraordinary. That is just beautiful to look at. I cannot get enough of these CGI images of Titanic. I know I'm sounding like a broken record here at this point, but God, I mean, that is so well done. That is, if you didn't know that was CGI, that could fool you. It is that well done. Oh, I love it. I just love it. Beautiful. I'm sorry, I have to keep pausing here. I just realized that I have this series because I purchased it, so I don't know what the copyright rules are for YouTube, so it's possible that the first episode of this might be taken down, in which case I'll probably just redo it tomorrow. Um, but anyway, so we're about to get into this bit where the lady Manton is complaining about her Irishness. She was born in County Wicklow, which is a county in Ireland still today. And at this time, if you are of Irish blood, you are seen as no better than a dog. And you will hear Mrs. Batley, the second class lady, uh, say, draw a metaphor basically to that as well. She says, if I grew up in a kennel, would that make me a dog? And that is really the mindset that's going on at this time, is that the Irish are seen as really second class citizens, and they have been for a long, long time. When the Irish famines happened in the 1840s, the British government did nothing to help them. And it was actually the United States that embarked on its first ever humanitarian mission to help the Irish out during the potato famines time period. And it was actually the famines themselves that triggered this wave of immigration from Europe to the United States. A fifth, 1/5, 20% of the world's population at the time. That's over that's over 1 million people, 1.5 million people who moved from Europe to the United States between about 1870 and about 1930. Excuse me, yeah, I'll say about 1930. 1920, the Far East uh, immigration got cut off because of the Immigration Acts, and it started to dry up in 1921 as well because of the influence of Prohibition. But for the most part, the immigration continued up until about 1930. Pretty much stopped. But anyway, I digress. So when you hear the Lady Manton talking about how, don't call me Irish, it's because of the fact that even though she is technically Irish, she was born Irish, she does not identify as Irish. She does not want to be seen as being Irish. She's very firm in her position that she's a proper English lady, and being Irish is not part of that. If you're Irish, you're nothing. You're a dog.
I wish you wouldn't call me Irish.
You are Irish.
I'm not. Not in that way.
See, there we go. Exactly.
You could have been friendlier.
Why? And why do we have to go through this ghastly tea?
To be polite, Batley works.
Good for you, Earl.
And if he does, I suppose he gets paid for it.
Hey now.
What's your cabin like?
All right, same as this.
Oh, how nice. Captain Smith will be joining our table for dinner.
So it's the captain's choice of which table he will go to and sit at for each night of the voyage, and it's usually a different table each night. I mean, this is a 7-day crossing. You got 6 nights to choose from, so the idea was that the captain, this is his opportunity to mingle with his richest clientele. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. Captain Smith is the genius at this. He is the highest paid captain in the world at this time. His salary is the equivalent of $200,000 a year in today's money. He is just loved by so many people to the point that the rich first class passengers would actually cancel their bookings on other ships so that they would go on ships that were under his command. So he's just beloved. He's an absolutely beloved man by pretty much everybody. He knows what he's doing. Captain Smith just gets such a bad reputation because of what happened with his last command, Titanic. But you gotta give it to him. He is a 35-year veteran of the North Atlantic, which is not an ocean for the faint of heart, believe me. And he has never, up until this point, had a serious accident. I'm of the opinion that the Olympic Hawk collision was Hawk's fault and that the Admiralty Court played favorites and ruled in favor of Hawk, but that's my opinion. I'm going to get into that in another video. As I said in the first video, just in case that one's taken down. Make a list of all the videos that I've promised that I'll write at some point, and comment down below so that I actually have the lists going and I won't forget them. Anyways, Smith is going to the Manton's table in this case. It is an honor to have the captain at your table, and it is especially an honor to have him the first night out at sea and the last night out at sea. The first night out at sea because it's the first time everyone's really going to be gathered together, and it makes a statement if the captain's going to be at your table the very first night out. And that statement lingers throughout the entire voyage. And then it's also an honor to have him the last, a bigger, I mean, it's an honor in general, but it's a bigger honor also on the last night, because that's the night that everyone is going to pull out their fanciest dress, their fanciest clothes. That's the night that everyone's really going to show off. And if you have the captain at your table, you can show off even more. Just say, by making that statement, you don't have to say anything. The fact that the captain's at your table the last night out makes a statement, just as it does the first night out. So that's where that's going from. So she's pretty nonchalant about it, but it's a really big honor.
Yourself up. I still don't see why not.
I love Georgiana. She's such a little
Because
spitfire.
I don't believe in the done thing. If I do a thing, I like to know why I'm doing it.
You wouldn't last long in the army.
Oh, I love it. I love it. If women were allowed to enlist at that time, and they really weren't. More or less, women in the military at this point in time. This is 1912. They did have roles in the auxiliary service, more or less, as nurses and or secretaries, but it was really limited. The military really did not start opening up their positions. They really didn't really start really accepting women. I mean, it was seen, but it wasn't super common until the war. And even then, actually, it was really more Red Cross that was involved in World War One than actual army nurses. And it really wasn't until about the 1930s and 1940s that you actually started seeing militaries really begin to open their doors to women for these positions. So, but it and it was not until about the 1970s that women were, at least in the United States, were not allowed. Excuse me. It was not until the 1970s that women in the United States were allowed to be in other roles, more combat type roles, beyond being a nurse or a secretary, and could actually rise through the ranks uh, and achieve uh, uh, a starhood. Basically become brass. An admiral or a general, or depending upon the branch that you're talking about here. And it was again not until the 1990s, Desert Storm, that women were allowed to be on the front line. So all these changes are very, very recent. And in 1912, these changes are non-existent. So just keep that in mind. You can call it misogynistic if you want, but this is a very different time period, and a lot of the terms we use nowadays do not exist in the vernacular, and why should they?
English and Scottish families. Might we share a table? That's what you'd like?
It's not catching being an American, and some of us quite like it.
Oh yeah.
So do you always look after the merchants?
I love being an American.
We've got a few of the second-class cabins as well. But we're first-class passengers. You're first-class servants. In every way, I'm sure.
Oh, you go, girl. You go, girl. I love Annie Desmond in this. She's wonderful. She's another one of those female characters. It's just a spitfire. She's wonderful. I love her. And my first episode video did just finally officially upload. I've been monitoring it on another tab as I record this one, and it looks like it's all clear. Is a copyright claim on it, but it's not enough to prevent it from being aired, so I'm happy about that. So we'll be able to continue, and I'll upload this one tonight. I don't know what I'll do with the other 2 episodes or not. I might try and get at least one of them done tonight. I don't know if we'll get all 4 of them done. We'll see. It's already midnight, and I got class in the morning. I'm finishing out my degree officially at this point. So we'll see. I might go ahead and record another one, but stay tuned on that one. If you see it uploaded on your screens or whatever, then you'll know. But I'll get back to you on that. And here he is, Captain Smith, the customer service agent. And he was so good at that, too. I'm not demeaning him at all. I admire Captain Smith for his skills here. I could never handle these people the way he handles them. So Very good.
Film star.
An interesting side note about Mrs. Gibson, Dorothy Gibson here. She starred in a film about the sinking of Titanic that was released a month after the sinking. And keep in mind, this is 1912, so this would be a silent film, so there's no dialogue. And she wore the same dress that she had on when the ship sank. And it was so difficult for her to remember about this. I mean, this is only a month after the ship sank. So she basically started filming this pretty much the next day. Once they got back to New York, she pretty much went back to the studio and started filming this. And she actually suffered a mental breakdown on the set. And you can't really blame her. I mean, this is such a traumatic experience for her. A lot of the survivors said later on that there were aspects of the disaster that they could never forget, and some of them never got over it, and you can't really blame them. God knows I don't.
Hello. Oh, Joe.
Harry
How lovely.
is a passenger who is very close to my heart. He is a bookworm. He, in fact, has the 1588 copy of the Francis Bacon. It's a second edition. There are pretty much no first editions around by this point. Second edition, um, a little bit more common, but not by much. It is a jewel encrusted copy. He is such a character. If you really read into his history, you can see that this is a kid who, well being groomed to take over the family fortune in Philadelphia, he's would be quite happy to spend the rest of his life in a library or an archive. And he's really a guy after my own heart because I'm the same way. I would take a library over a crowd of people any day of the week. I mean, no offense. But I just love Harry Widener. He's such a sweetheart, and his mother did such a service for dedicating a library in New York to him. It's the Harry Widener Library. If you've never been to it, I strongly suggest you go. And yeah, I just love Harry. He's such a sweetheart. I have to get every shot that I can here. I can't help myself.
Anything you'd like to hear, miss?
Do you know Autumn by Archibald Joyce?
We know all the waltzes, miss.
I love Song de Autumn. It's such a rhythmic, beautiful, soft tone.
May I have the
And
pleasure?
if you play it on the piano, which is very similar to the violin, I play the piano. And it's just such a beautiful song to listen to. I'm going to pause it really quick here again because of copyright issues. I don't want to get under, the headquarters scan or anything like that here. So Wallace Hartley, who you saw there, he's the leader of the band. He has a fiance back in England that he was going to marry when he returned from this latest tour. Musicians would spend weeks on a ship and then um, would get some time off and then they would go back out again. They were also required to memorize the entire book of songs that the White Star Line had, and there were over 200 songs in there, ranging from hymns to ballads to waltzes, you name it. And they had to memorize all of them. They were not allowed to have books with them. They actually had to play these songs from memory. So you can imagine just how good of a player you had to be able to do that. And he played so well. Um, there are so many different videos on YouTube about that actually have these songs from the booklet that have been recorded by modern professionals, and I strongly suggest you listen to them because some of them are just beautiful. And Song of the Autumn is one of them. Song of the Autumn, I like the fact that they used this one in the series because I want to talk about this for a second because of the fact that for the longest time the myth was it was Nearer My God to Thee that was the last song that was heard. but it was actually Song Dayatam, and this is based upon several eyewitness accounts who reported this years later, including one survivor who, when she was a passenger on another liner about 30 years later, when Song Dayatam started playing on that ship, she requested that they don't play it because it was the last song that was played on Titanic. So that's that's a fact that I like seeing in this series. It's a historically accurate fact, so I do like the fact that they are trying to stick more to history on this one than just catering to the myth, because it's so easy, especially with a story like Titanic, to cater to the myth. And in this one, they don't really do that where when they can help it. I mean, there is plenty of aspects of this that are fictional. Of course, the Mantons themselves are fictional characters, but they do a good job of staying away from the myth where they can. So I will give them that.
Would you like me to turn down the bed, madam?
Come in.
Didn't mean to be unfriendly.
You saw how she looked at us when we invited us to tea. She couldn't have been more shocked if we'd spat in her face. Could you help me with this?
You exaggerate.
I do not. And why, in the name of God, did you agree to attend an Anglican service? Of course, Lord Manton. My pleasure, Lord
I
Manton.
thought it'd be interesting.
And the necklace, the clasp is...
I'm with Desmond here on this one. I'm hiding my grin. She thinks she's a countess, and she's right.
Well, she also thinks she's a nut.
She grew up in County Wicklow.
If I grew up in a kennel, would it make me...
And here it is. This is what I'm talking about when it comes to the Irish and the situation with Britain and Ireland at this point in time. Part of Ireland wants to be self-governing, and part of it does not. This leads to a split, and this is why we have Northern Ireland and Ireland to this day. Northern Ireland chose to remain part of the British Empire. Ireland itself did not. So you have this divide. And so in the meantime, if you are Irish or of Irish descent, you do not advertise that. You hide that because it's not considered acceptable in society if you are Irish.
So-called Anglo-Irish or Anglo-First and Irish, never. They've crushed the life out of us since the dawn of
Yep.
time. And you expect me to sit and chat with her over a plate of sandwiches?
Absolutely, she's 100% correct. The English made it one of their pastimes to trample on the rights of the Irish. They did not have any patience for the Irish. Where exactly this prejudice started is not entirely clear, but it really gained traction during the Victorian era. The Victorians hated the Irish. They absolutely despised them. They wanted nothing to do with them. If it were up to them alone, they probably would have just cast them out and left them out to starve. Actually, they did actually try doing that during the famines. They did absolutely nothing to help the Irish. That's why the United States had to get involved. But the end result is you have a lot of resentment, and I don't blame the Irish one bit for being resentful. I'd be resentful too. And you see that resentment displayed here with Mrs. Batley.
Jack, it's past your bedtime.
Even in 1912, there was such a thing as a helicopter mom.
I'm
I'm not sure what they called it back then because helicopters didn't exist.
I can't believe you just... Mother, that's so embarrassing. It's just embarrassing.
Poor Jack.
May I? Second Officer Charles Lightoller, at your service.
Won't you be struck off?
On this ship, the passengers' welfare is all we care about.
Very glad to hear.
Besides, I'm a fan.
Better and better.
Love it.
I mean it. I enjoyed you in Miss Masquerader and in Hands Across the Sea.
Heavens, you really are a fan.
Both are Miss Masquerader and Hands Across the Sea are both playwrights that Dorothy did. By this point, in 1912, she's a very well-established actress, and Masquerader, actually, I think to this day, is still somewhat popular. Another way to piss off your parents, Georgiana?